How about it? Any sound yet? Okay. Any sound? Can't hear me? Okay, we're checking out the system. Testing, 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 testing. Are we turned on over here? Is there a switch over here?
Yeah, there is.
Let's see, are you turned on or not?
I don't know.
Yes, this is on. Well, things like this happen. Testing, testing. We were a little bit rushed to start with before we went out to dinner. I just thought I'd like to, since our speaker is going to be concentrating on his time while he was in the service, I thought I'd give you a little bit about before and after. And it'd be nice if we had the sound so that we could get this onto the tape along with everything else. In the meantime, you get a chance to read a little bit about his early days. Grew up in Logan, graduated from Germantown High in 1935, enlisted in the Army Air Cadet Program in 1940. He served active duty in the Air Force to 1945. He settled in, I believe, Elkins Park after military service, and has lived in Abington, what did you say, the last 27 years?
27.
Okay. I've listed here that he started the Schaefer Gordon Associates, but in fact, as I read through the brochure, the company was started in 1915. He formed a construction and was successful enough to buy airplanes and fly all over the place. He also purchased other construction companies and was president of Schaefer Gordon Associates. They did the things I've listed there: construction management, engineering and building construction, design, financing and plant layout, process layout and site planning, and construction consultants. He retired and has been living in Abington near the library, and incidentally, for the past 3 years he has been blind with macular degeneration. So I'm going to be reading his notes and where necessary, maybe giving him a cue here now and then. I was impressed by his company, and I thought I would list some of the things the company has done. It doesn't show up real well at the top there, but the company has built many regional shopping malls from Connecticut to North Carolina, I guess, and I know as far as Lebanon, west from here, Lebanon, Pennsylvania. And some of them are just listed there. I won't bother to read them all. He also they've built many department stores and chain stores, and you see a listing of a number of them. And then other things, stores and shopping malls, movie theaters, hotels, and motor inns, redevelopment and office buildings, branch banking. They built the 3 sections of Cedar Brook Hills apartment complex. And is that Glenside or Wyncote? Wyncote, I guess. And many other different kinds of facilities there, which ended up on my list with the Keystone Racetrack in Bucks County. So I was impressed, and I knew he wasn't going to talk about all of that, so I thought, well, if he's not going to talk about it, I will. Now, we're not going to have videos to show during the talk, but I thought I would try to put on here, if I can figure out which way is up, here's something that shows a little bit of the Pacific. It's a very busy thing, but you'll find that in his talk that he flew halfway around the world before he got his commission. Without giving too much of his thunder, he was a navigator to take a new Boeing B-17 from the plant and then to Florida, and from Florida all around the route that he took. And they ended up in Java. Here is Australia. Here is Java, Sumatra, Borneo, Indochina, Thailand, Philippines. So the Japanese had driven the 93rd Bomb Group out of the Philippines, and at the time they were working out of Java. The Japanese chased them out of Java, burned their planes, and well, that's part of the story that I'm not going to tell you about, but at least it gives you an idea of the location. It looks like that our audio engineers are having difficulty. Can we videotape without the sound? And then we're going to talk. No sound. So we're going to have to videotape without using the sound system here. It's too bad because it sounds better when you can hear it. Should I get the other microphone and?
No, we don't have time for this.
Well,
Go ahead, here, give me that microphone and I'll try to work on it while you guys are going.
let's undo you then. Okay. So you have to speak up a little bit louder until we can get a sound system for you.
I'm still going to videotape, so make sure you're in the way.
Okay, I'm going to move this all out of the way here.
That went to the camera.
It's not in there.
I know, because we're not getting anything from that system, so it's useless. I'm going to use this one.
Guess you need a drink, some water. Enlisted in 1941, flying cadet program. Okay, do you want to sit down? Okay. So,
It's not recording yet. You gotta push the red button over here to record.
so without further ado, Gordon Weinberg.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I'd like to commend that, well, we're going to send you to navigation school because you have to know a lot about mathematics. So I didn't like that, but as I remember, a cadet had the same status as a mouse. Say a rat. But anyway, there were three answers you could give. Yes, sir. No, sir. No excuse, sir. So I said, yes, sir. Because he was a captain. And in those days, in 1940, captain was a lot of rank. And my status was about as well as you could get as a cadet. So without further ado, they sent me down to Celestial Navigation School. And that was, well, we went to Montgomery, Alabama. I had a pretty good tour of the South. And that was where I learned that damn Yankee was one word. Somebody yelled out the last time I was here, that, and they still do. So, be that as it may, it was very nice in the South. It's warm, and a lot warmer than it is up here. Sure. Anyway, we went to navigation school and did flying in AT-7s, which were twin engine. They were Lockheed twin engines, and we learned the navigation there, which I guess I don't want to talk to people that know all this, but you get your position by the stars, or the sun, or with dead reckoning, looking out the window. So in those days, which are getting to seem longer and longer ago, in those days we did not have the equipment that they have today, or for some years now. As far as navigation is concerned, they have everything is VHF. That's very high frequency. We had UHF, which was rather wrong because that's ultra high frequency. This was low frequency, LF, and all communications from airplanes were done on low frequency, which was mostly static. It's not like today. And today you have a range of maybe, when you're about 5,000 feet, you have a range in VHF of about 60 miles, and it's always very clear. And there's all kinds of navigation equipment you can buy that gives you your position automatically. You know, everything is computers. So we didn't have that luxury. What we had was a sextant or an octant in which you took sights on stars and sun and planets, and we were trained in that. And at night we used to go out in the bright nights and in Georgia and do it on the ground. When you do it from the platform of an airplane, it's a little shakier and sometimes very shaky. So this is what we did. To get on into this story, we went from Langley Field. I got you to Langley Field, which we were sent to right after we graduated. And of course, in the usual way, those of you who have been in any military service, everything got messed up, snafu'd, as we say, and they didn't have our commissions. So we went up to Langley Field as flying cadets. And took a long time for them to get the commission straightened out. But anyway, we went to Langley Field, and from there we went to at that time it was a permanent post, and the bomb group that was there had been flying B-18s. A B-18 was a twin engine version of the latest bomber they had. They were just being fitted out with B-17s, which was really the latest bomber for it, and it was a...
Patty Duck in the library, please come and circulate. Patty Duck.
Okay.
Do
Can you hear me?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. Waving their hand. Let's see. About 20, 21.
How many months?
How many months? I'm lucky I remember how old I was. So figure it out yourself. I was born in 1918. So all you mathematicians can figure it out. And does that answer your question? Okay. I was draft meat. I was of the age and I was in good health, and I had 20/20 vision then. I like to remember that. And at that time, there wasn't any airports really. It was very, very small, and they considered you had to be Superman to fly an airplane, which was not true. When we got our first stop right after we were sent to Virginia was, at that time, this particular group, squadron, had sent all their materiel, clothes and all, up to Newfoundland, where they were supposed to go up there and cover the, at that time, the German submarines were sinking a lot of our ships, and we were supposed to fly cover for these convoys out of Newfoundland. And so they sent up all the equipment, everything. You know how the Army does it. They send up everything. And from Langley Field, we went to Mitchell Field, which was, it's a field in Long Island. If any of you don't know it, it's not there anymore. It's now a shopping center. So we were sent to Mitchell Field, and that's where we were. And the weather was terrible, really bad, like the last few days. And so they said each day they would say, "You're not going today. The weather's too bad." And so we didn't go. So finally it got to be Sunday, and they said, gave us a break, said you can go downtown to New York, and you can have enjoy yourselves. Be back here tonight. So we did, and I remember, this is something you don't forget. I went to the Capitol Theater with a bunch of guys where Woody Herman was playing. If any of you gentlemen remember Woody Herman, and he was there in person, and that was the stage show. So about, I don't know, halfway through the show, they turned up the house lights, and a whole bunch of MPs came down the aisle. And anybody with a uniform, they tapped more or less gently on the knee and said, "Everybody out now." And when we went out, we found that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. And we knew that, and they told you to go back to your base immediately. So we went back to Mitchell Field, and the weather was still bad. It was really bad. And they said, "You're going to the West Coast." And we said, "Well, the weather's bad. Don't make any difference. Weather, no weather. You gotta go to the West Coast to Warsaw." So we said, "Okay, what else would you say?" And so we got the crews together and fired up the B-17s, and they said, "You're the navigator, how we get to the West Coast?" I was a pretty smart navigator. I said, "You fly west." Right away made me one of the smartest guys in the outfit. So we did. We went west. We went west by way of Pittsburgh, somewhere in Ohio, and Columbus, Ohio. And if you'll remember, those of you who remember, that at that time, all the airlines were grounded right after the war started. You remember they grounded all the airlines, and everyone, no flying at all. So we were out there. We didn't have any trouble with traffic for a change, and all the airlines were on the ground. But we went in this
Radio blackout?
really terrible weather. Well, that comes later. But the weather was lousy. Anyway, we went to Columbus, Ohio. Yeah.
With these B-17, what models were you flying with? With the chin turrets or the old
These.
ones with the old turrets?
These.
Gotcha.
And So we went to Columbus, Ohio, then we went to somewhere else. Pony.
St. Louis?
What I remember.
You didn't list that on here.
Well, I
Doesn't
skipped
matter.
Columbus, didn't make any difference. And then we went west further, Butte, Montana, finally to Butte, Montana. And from Butte, Montana, we were told, go to Geiger Field in Spokane, Washington. So we went to Geiger Field in Spokane, Washington, which was a mud hole at the time. Because if you'll remember, at that time, they were just building airports. They finally figured out to have to have airplanes, you got to have an airport. So they were building these airports, and this was one of them. Then when we got there, they greeted us, you're not staying here. Go to Yakima, Washington. That was a good trick if anybody knew where it was. But it was on the Columbia River, so we went down to Yakima, Washington. And there we were supposed to go down the Columbia River, go out to sea, the Pacific Ocean to be exact, and fly 500 miles out and do a search pattern, and then come back after a while, after our range was done. So we did that because we were looking for Japanese submarines, which they had rumors, if you'll remember, were all over the West Coast. They were going to invade the West Coast. So we were going to make sure that they didn't go up the Columbia River, and they were supposed to, the rumor was they were going to shell the Boeing plant. And we did our search patterns and went out there day after day for a few days and never saw a submarine. So then we went to, they told us, don't stay here in Yakima. Leave and go down to March Field in California. So that was at the other end. So we just said, okay, go down to March Field, and on the way they said, stop at Seattle. You're going to pick up a brand new airplane. So we got to Seattle, and there were all these B-17s parked out on Boeing's big field there. And these were B-17 D model. Mm-hmm. And they were the first ones to have a tail gun, tail turret. And so we thought that was pretty good. And a brand new airplane. So they gave us a stack of papers this high, and they were all the manuals that you had to have in a B-17. So they said, well, you take off immediately. So we said, well, we want to fly it around a little first. And they said, no, you don't need to. Fly's the same as the other one. So that was really the instructions. So got in, and it's a little more or less the same as the other one, except we had a little more power and so forth. So from there we went down to Bakersfield, California to gas up, and then went on down to March Field in Riverside, California, where they greeted us there and said, you're not staying here. You're going to go to the East Coast. I want you to go to Tampa, Florida. So, again, we figured it out. Fly east. And after a while, sure enough, there was Tampa, Florida. And as we taxied up at Tampa, they had a big sign on the hangar, Project X, admittance to navigators and pilots only. So we went into Project X, where it was in a hangar, and they brought out a great big cardboard carton of charts, none of the type of which none of us had ever seen before. They were all Navy charts. And the Navy charts are just graphs. They do not have the geographic markings on them at all. They just have latitude and longitude. And you pick that off the other charts, put it on this chart as a spot, and that's where you're going. So anyway, that was pretty interesting. And they told us to fly the airplanes out over Tampa Bay, and try out your guns. Now, none of us had ever fired a machine gun in our lives. And so we went out, and thank goodness on board our crew were two real old timers. A guy named Soupy Camel, and somebody who was the flight engineer, and he showed us how to load and fire these guns, which we did out over the water there. And they were 50 caliber machine guns. They make an awful racket, and none of us could hit the side of a barn with them. So we came back, and it happened to be New Year's Eve. And they said that, look, we're leaving tonight, you guys are leaving tonight, and we're going to give you a flimsy, which has the weather on it and your next destination, and that's all. So, in bowing to you, we never believed the weather because it was never right at that time. So it got better later when you got in there. But we got the crew together, and we decided it's no time to go to war on New Year's Eve. That is out. So we decided that wasn't a good idea, and we kind of put our heads together and told them about the oil leak in the number 3 engine. They said they'd fix it right away. So we stole around, and the next day somebody got hold of us, one of the officers there, and told us we were leaving that night, engine or no engine. We did. And just before we left, we were given another flimsy that told us the weather, and that said our first stop was down in where did I got me?
Port of Spain?
Yeah,
Trinidad.
Port of Spain, Trinidad. Now the East Coast was blacked out at that time. Everything was blacked out. But we got a pretty good fix going over Cuba, because Cuba wasn't blacked out. The lights were burning like crazy, so I knew exactly where we were when we were over Cuba. And we went down to Port of Spain, Trinidad, where we were greeted, told we got to keep on going. So our next stop was a place called Belém, Brazil. Anybody ever hear of
I was
Belém,
there.
Brazil?
I was
You were
there.
there? Okay. Well, that's not exactly the garden spot.
No.
And as we landed there, they said that tonight you're not staying here. We'll feed you dinner, but you got to get going. So on the hangar at this field in Belém was a great big sign that said Luftwaffe. And the Germans had the South America airlines pretty well tied up. And anyway, it was an uncomfortable feeling. So we went dinner somewhere, and we had to gas up. And we gassed up out of 50-gallon drums. They had no big tankers. They had 50-gallon drums. And if you do this for a little while, you get tired.
Excuse me, did you mean Lufthansa, the German airline?
Yeah, Lufthansa. Did I say Lufthansa?
You said Luftwaffe.
Well, it was Lufthansa, the German airline. Didn't make us feel any better. So we did that, and we gassed up, and everybody said, look, we can't vouch for this gas. It's in the drums that were left here, but that's what you got to use. But you better strain it. So we strained every gallon through chamois. And boy, that's a job. So we did that, and that night they said, you're leaving for Africa, Gold Coast of Africa, and across the Atlantic Ocean this was. So, you know, by the time I realized that, I figured the last guy I heard across the Atlantic Ocean in an airplane was Weinberg. That was great. We decided we'd go. We had no choice. But anyway, they gave us another flimsy and told us it was on the Gold Coast of Africa, and we found it on a map of some kind. And these were all night flights and by celestial navigation, because it was radio silence. They told us before we left Florida, absolutely don't use the radios because the Japanese are listening. What they were doing in Belém, Brazil, I don't know. But, we weren't allowed to use the radio. There was no navigation devices, radio navigation devices. So we were strictly on celestial navigation. There's only one little problem. We had trained in Georgia and had faithfully gone out at night and shot the stars and learned which was which and that sort of thing, and planets. Now, though, just so happened we were in the southern hemisphere, so the stars are a little different down there. But anyway, that's what it was. And the guy that pioneered this route was some colonel, pardon me, Myers. I wouldn't want to say anything about colonels when they're sitting in the room, but this guy pioneered it in a English B-24, which had longer range and was a little faster than the B-17. And we had not belly tanks, but bomb bay tanks. In the bomb bays of the B-17, they put gas tanks, and for longer range. And every one of his pioneering flights were done in an airplane that had a longer range and was a little faster than ours. So unless you hit every place right on the nose, you had no time to search. And that was a little disconcerting. But anyway, it was a little hard to miss the coast of Africa, but we found it, and just about in time, and that was fine. So when we landed, guess what they said? You're not staying. You're going on to Accra in Africa. But that's where we went, Accra, and that was on the north coast of Africa. So we went up there, and once again, that night I do remember, I got to tell you about, because we slept. Accra was reputedly the oldest city in the world. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they told us. And the accommodations there were not too great. We slept on blankets in the road, and next to us, about like this, was a camel caravan, which was resting for the night. If you ever slept next to a bunch of camels for the night, you never forget it. So we were very happy the next morning to get up and get the hell out of there. The next stop, we were told, was Khartoum at the forks of the Nile River. I don't know where they dreamed these places up, but they didn't get them out of very good catalogs. But Khartoum was probably the hottest place in the whole world. And the only thing I remember about Khartoum, being a little bit of a history buff, was that a guy named General Gordon of the English had got knocked out of there by a bunch of tribe of Arabians. Yeah. And, but that was Khartoum. And we couldn't do any maintenance at all in the daytime. It was too hot. And you just couldn't touch the airplane. So the guys, whoever we had, just the onboard crews, did it at night. We had a flight engineer and a couple of guys that knew the plane. And we did it at night, and in the daytime we were told to take off, and we were going to Arabia, to somewhere in Arabia. And so we did that, but they said, wait, before you go, we got to tell you, have you had your cholera shots? So we had not had any cholera shots. So they said, well, you can't go there without a cholera shot. And it takes 2 cholera shots, and can't stay overnight. They need you, so you got to go now. So we're going to give you the 2 cholera shots at once. And being in the Army, being what it is, they did. No questions asked. Came up and bang, 2 cholera shots at one time. Don't do that, it's no good. That is as much medicine as I know, but it's the truth. And the next day, boy, we were sick. But we had to go. Boy, everybody took turns flying, doing whatever they had to do, including navigation. It was a mess. We got to Accra, and I wouldn't put that on my list of places to go as a tourist. Man, that is nothing but desert. And we also were told we couldn't stay there, which was fine with us. And the next stop was Bangalore, India. So we went up to Bangalore. We took off at night, went to Bangalore, India. And of course there they were building the runway. And we had the metal mats to land on. I don't know if any of you ever landed on metal mats. Sounds like the whole airplane's coming apart when you do. And they were building this runway by, they had about 1 million Indians that were pouring concrete on top of it. The way they were putting down the stone, they had about 1 million Indians out there with a little basket on their head full of stones. So they'd walk down the runway. When they got to the right place, they'd dump the stones. That was not going to be a fast deal. So anyway, we stayed in Karachi overnight, and then they told us the next stop was Bangalore, India. So the next day we went to Bangalore, India. The charts we were using were not too great, but those of you who have any familiarity with American sectional charts, they are absolutely works of art. Seriously, they are great. And the charts we had were not great, but you know, you could get a latitude and longitude off. And once again, they were night flights. The only radio contact we were allowed to have was if a place had a tower, which most of these places didn't. And when we got there, we'd find the runway and the land. That's all there was to it. We were met usually by some guy in a khaki outfit who was reputedly not in the Air Force. This thing is my watch, and I'm going to watch it to make sure that I don't interfere anywhere near the president. You'll be home by then.
We won't miss anything.
These are great for guys that can't see. And 757, not bad. So anyway, we went to Bangalore, India, where we got the same message, you're not staying here. Go to Palembang, Sumatra. And that was across whatever ocean is down there, I don't know, the Indian Ocean. And we went to Palembang, Sumatra. The only problem there, and each time was a little problem, the only problem was you were crossing the equator, in which they tell me that there's always an equatorial storm. Is that right? You're the weatherman, right? At the time when we went there was an equatorial storm, so they were right. Boy, it was a beaut, real thunderstorm. And we flew through it that night, and I thought the place would come apart. But, and scared. Have you ever seen fire coming off the propellers and the leading edge of a wing? I thought the plane was on fire, but the two old timers with us said, don't worry, nothing. They call that St. Elmo's fire, and it's from static electricity. It didn't make me feel much better, but a little better. And we went through the storm. Only other problem was, it was getting to be dawn. Storm was breaking up, but after dawn you can't see any stars. By this time, being through the storm all night, I hadn't the slightest idea where we were. But I found 3 stars that hadn't faded yet, 3 that I knew, and grabbed a fix. You need 3 stars for a fix. One, this is the best way, is one to your right about 90 degrees, one to your left about 90 degrees, and one dead ahead. That gives you 3 lines of position which cross, hopefully in a small triangle. And if it's a small triangle, you know you got a good fix. And that's where you are, right in the middle of that triangle. Whatever, no matter what, that's where you are. So we did that, and I got a pretty fair fix. And we headed for Palembang, where they, of course, told us that you're not staying here. Come a little way. You're going to Java, which is the next island down. And at Palembang, we did get some food and gassed up at every place, of course. But by this time, the Dutch had the Dutch owned those islands down there, and they had some gas trucks and things like that. So we weren't doing the hand bit with the gas, and so that was an improvement. They had food down there. It wasn't bad either. But they said, you're not staying here. You got to go to the next island down, which is Java, and you go to Malang, Java, which is up in the mountains, up in the hills. And it was 60 miles from the south coast in a town called Malang, and the airport was called the Singasari Airport. It was a great big grass field. Nothing wrong with grass field, they're fine. But that's where we went, to this airport in the mountains of Malang, and from there they told us we were going to fly up the Makassar Strait. Now I don't know, I can't see this map, but
We don't have the map up there anymore.
oh, it isn't up there anymore? Okay. So I
That's why you
can't show
can't-
you.
that's why you
Makassar
can't see
Strait.
it.
Makassar Strait is another place you probably won't go on any tour, but it's between, it's the body of water between Borneo on one side, and on the other side are the Celebes Islands. And we flew up the Makassar Strait. That's what they told us to do, so we did. And went up there the first day. They told us to bomb the Japanese ships which we'd find up there. And we found them. There were about 1 million of them. And the whole damn Japanese Navy was there, I think. And there were ships, boy, wall to wall. And they were headed down the Macassar Strait. So, being these big bombers, we were told to bomb at 20,000 feet using this Norden bomb site, Miracle bomb site. And so we were, first of all, the B-17 couldn't get up to 20,000 feet with a bomb load. And we could get up to about 18,000, and then, boy, it'd start to mush. And so we got up around 18,000 feet and took a run at these ships. They were so solid I didn't think you could miss, but we could. And then we came back, and we would come back. We would do this every day. We'd go up. These ships were not hard to find, believe me. But every day they were a little further south toward Java. And one day we went up and we decided that after a couple of trips that there's 18,000 feet, it's for the birds. And if we were going to hit anything and do any good, we had to get down lower. So we did. We went in at about 5,000 to 6,000 feet and could get a really good shot at them. And I don't know what we hit once, but when we came back once, they told us that you had sunk a battleship. I didn't believe it for a minute. Pretty tough to sink a battleship. I should drop it right down a stack. And I don't think we did that. But maybe we scared them a little, but not much. And they kept coming south. And when we got back to our field in Java, the Japanese knew everything that was going on. They knew our names. They would tell us on the radio, if you listen to the radio, music or whatever, Tokyo Rose was on. And she'd say, boy, it's nice to have you out here, Gordon, and so-and-so, and so, boy, she knew them all. Give you your serial number if you wanted. And every night when we came back, not night, when we came back, it was still daylight, because this field had no lights. The Japanese came over afterward and bombed and strafed the field. And one day I was getting out of the airplane. Incidentally, if you'll remember, my clothes were now in Newfoundland. Everything that we had on our back that we had left, you know, not much, but some uniforms and things were in B-4 bags in the planes. So the Japanese came over and they bombed us and strafed us every night. And I was getting out of the airplane one night, one afternoon, late, and just as I got out, somebody yelled, "Here they come!" I look up and there's a line abreast of about 7 or 8 Zero fighters. I'm sure that's what they were. They sure weren't ours. And they were coming in low and strafing the airport. And every one looked like it was headed right for me. But so on this field, it was a big field, they had revetments of sandbags, big squares, about 10-foot square, hollow squares. And in the middle was a 30 caliber machine gun. So these guys coming down the field, I took a running jump head first into one of these revetments. And then we were going to get the machine gun out, knock all these guys down, but it didn't work that way because we didn't know how to use this particular gun. It was a 30 caliber machine gun. So they fired at us, but and boy, it's no fun. I got down so low, I must have dug into the ground. I could hear the bullets thumping against the outside of the sandbags. And they did this, you know, every day. when we came back. They knew the schedule. And the other thing we did, it was very heroic. Instead of jumping into the sandbag next time, we went into the surrounding thickets of tapioca. There were tapioca bushes. And they'd bomb us. They didn't hit us. But I didn't like the sound of those bombs coming down. Not a good sound. But they didn't hit anything really. And they'd blow the place up a little bit, and that was it. And they'd leave until the next day. But gradually they were coming down closer and closer to Java. Well, finally we were told that they had landed on the south coast of Java. We were 60 miles up from the south coast, up in the mountains. Not much of a mountain, it was an airport. But we knew they were going to come up there for us. So we were gotten together and told, time to leave. Now there's no fun being on the losing end of a war, let me tell you. And that's what we were. We were on the losing end. They were just taking everything. And they landed on the south coast, and we knew we were 60 miles inland, so how long could it take them to get up there? And so we were called together and told, in a nice way, get the hell out. So we said, well, you know, they had burned up our airplanes every day when they strafed the field with the clothes and with everything. So we went down to the south coast. They told us to go down to the south coast of Java and pick up a ship. So we didn't know what to do. We went down the south coast of Java. And we got there, we found a train that was going down there. And a narrow gauge railroad train. Got on that with a little persuasion. And they took us down to a town called Chillichap, where there was a port, and there were some freighters down there, some Dutch freighters, the cargo ships, and they said, pick out one and go to Australia. You can't stay there either. So we said, well, you know, that was the best thing to do, go to Australia. So we divided up and we took one of these ships. The captain was a Dutchman who didn't speak a word of English and was cockeyed drunk. And we persuaded him to take us out of the harbor and take us to Australia, which is the next stop, if you know the map, down till the Antarctic, of course. So we divided up. There were guys that knew how to run the engine. I don't know how they knew how to run it. It was a diesel engine. And they did that, and we had, and they had a couple of 30 caliber machine guns mounted up on the I don't know, on a ship. It's not the conning tower. It's the bridge up on the bridge deck. And I was nominated to be the navigator, of course. So what's the difference? You're navigating a ship or you're navigating a plane, I figured. It was a little different. You have to do the corrections. This I found out the hard way. When you take a sight on a ship, you bring the star down to the horizon, which you can see, the horizon. But you have to allow for the height of the sight above the water. Well, in an airplane, you don't have to do that, and because you don't have that correction to make. And I'm glad you're nodding your head yes, because this is coming back.
Got it.
I didn't know how to make that correction, so I had we were miles from where I thought we were. But we're in the open ocean down there, which is was that the Arctic Ocean or whichever ocean it is, down there below Java. And
India.
we went straight south. That was my theory. Go straight south because they won't find us there. But the next problem was submarines because they knew we were there and they knew we had gotten out, so they're going to search for us. And about a couple days out, sure enough, comes a recon Japanese plane, and he finds us, and then a couple hours later comes another plane, a fighter. So he comes down and strafes the ship, and we're firing back at him. But of course, by this time, somebody had told us how to use one of these pop guns, and we didn't hit him, and he didn't hit us. Nice arrangement. He dropped some bombs, but he was pretty far off on the right or left. And we kept going south, and we did 2 hours up in the crow's nest in this ocean, and 4 hours off. That's no fun. Have you ever been in the crow's nest of a ship while it's going in the ocean? If you have any queasiness whatsoever, it'll show up there. And so we went up to, I was watching, and you know, you saw nothing but submarines. Every wave was a submarine as far as we can tell. And, but we kept going south for a while, and then we turned toward Australia. And after 5 days, sleeping on the deck, eating from a field kitchen, which I had set up on the deck. And, you know, it wasn't like the food you get on a cruise, really.
Really?
It was food, it was all right. So we turned toward Australia, and that also we hit pretty good for a ship navigator.
It's pretty big though,
I
isn't it?
hit Perth, which was a port on the west coast of Australia. So we hit Perth, and there we were told that you're not going to stay here either. They said, but there's a hotel here. Get in a hotel, and you can stay there until we tell you what to do. So we did that, and that was welcome. Boy, after sleeping on the deck, we had beds and bathrooms and everything. So while we were in Australia, I don't want to screw up the president, but anyway, we stayed in Australia. And we finally, somebody came around, some soldier, American soldier, U.S. soldier.
How
I
about
don't know
taking
where
some
he
water
came
and then
from.
you can get your volume up a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Have to increase the volume.
That's only water now.
Take what you can get. Thank you very much.
Okay, a little more volume.
Okay, I'll give you a little more volume, okay? All right in the back? Okay. Anyway, they said in Australia, this soldier, I don't know how this U.S. soldier got to Perth, Australia, but we could, you see, at that time, the Pacific Ocean was owned by the Japanese. Therefore, we could not fly over the proper way. We had to go the long way around, which we did. And they told us they had, you know, some clothes for us. We were pretty gamey by this time. And they told us they had clothes for us, which was fine. And they had a whole bunch of khakis laid out there that they had gotten off a ship that was on its way to the Philippines. From the Philippines, they had to get out of the Philippines. So the ship diverted to Australia, and somehow it got to Perth. And we had, they had, you know, nice khakis for us. Khaki shirt, khaki pants, socks, shoes. The only trouble was they were bound, the ship was bound for the Philippines. And those guys are little guys. And thank goodness, at the only time in my life I was glad I wasn't one of the big guys, you know. And we had, and they were too small for us too, but they were made for the Filipinos. So, but we were glad to get there, and we at least had a change of clothes. So then one day they rounded us up. We were living it up pretty good in a hotel after that fight. So they told us that from now you're going from the west coast of Australia to the east coast to not Sydney, but Melbourne, Australia. So I said, how are we going to get there? We got no airplanes. Oh, no, they're going by train. So the distance from Perth to Melbourne is about the same distance as from New York to San Francisco. So we got on this train, and this was a steam train, steam engine train, and out in Australia they burn soft coal. So there's no air conditioning, no nothing. So we open the windows, and, you get, boy, a pretty good load of smoke, cinders and stuff like that. But you couldn't keep the windows closed. You just couldn't do it. So we started out for Melbourne, and it was slow going. In Australia, each state has a different gauge track. And that's true, and I don't know if it's still true today or not. Because I haven't ridden on a train, forget it, in Australia since. But at each stop there was a different state. You had to change trains to the train with the right gauge. And so that way we kind of limped across Australia. And boy, I'm telling you, there's a lot of real estate out there with nothing on it. And they had huge rabbits. We were running all around until the guys got out there, 45, started to shoot at the rabbits. And that made things nice because I knew somebody was going to get shot. And we finally got to Melbourne, where we were told, they didn't say you weren't going to stay there. They said, we got a place for you to stay. So they took us to a place called Royal Park, which is like Fairmount Park here. And in Royal Park, they had set up tents, two-man tents. And they said, this is where you're going to stay. So we stayed in these tents in Royal Park. Weather in Australia, this must have been in March. And the weather down there is not the greatest in the world in Melbourne. But we stayed there, and then they said that they had gotten some airplanes from the Philippines, and we're going back in action. So they said, you leave here and you fly up to Townsville, which is in Queensland, Australia, which is farther north. And if you know your geography, the farther north you go in Australia, the more tropical it is. So Townsville was pretty tropical, and we went up there and told we were going to bomb out of there. So they told us to go from there to, when we bombed up, and we were going to go up and bomb Port Moresby in New Guinea. And the Japanese, the theory was the Japanese were, there's no map, but the Japanese were going to take Port Moresby. If this was Australia, they were going to take Port Moresby and run a pincher action on all our Navy that was down there, and they were going to cut off all the supplies and all that kind of stuff. They were also going to invade Australia. And believe me, the Australians were scared to death. And I would have been too. But it looked like nothing was going to stop them. So we went up to New Guinea, Port Moresby, and we used a field that they had scrabbled out of the rock up there. And called 7 Mile Drome, which was 7 miles from the town of Port Moresby. So we landed on the mats again, and we'd gas up there, and then go on up, further up New Guinea, to where the Japanese were. Well, they were not very far away. They were right across the mountain, the big mountain there at Port Moresby, and they were across the other side of the mountain at a place called Boona. And so we went over, we used to fly around the mountain and bomb Boona. Because the next stop of theirs was Port Moresby. So anyway, one day I was walking down what passed for a flight line, and I fell over. I didn't know anything about it. I just passed out cold. And the next thing I knew, I was in a field hospital. Field hospital isn't much, but it's something. And they told me that they didn't know what was wrong, because mostly, I don't think there were many doctors. I think there was a nurse or two. And told me I had dengue fever and viral pneumonia. All I know was I felt lousy. And and the Japanese, we were getting these bulletins and rumors, more or less, from different people. The Japanese had started up this mountain and were going over something called the Boona Trail. And they were going to go over the Boona Trail to Port Moresby. And the thing that was going to stop them was the Wisconsin National Guard, which was up there and they were in wool uniforms. We had ferried them up from somewhere down Australia. Our bunch of guys, when they got some airplanes, came on up and took them up to Port Moresby, where they were supposed to stop the Japs on the Boona Trail. And by God, they did. In the meantime, they had come around to each patient, and they had handed us a new 45 and said that put it under your pillow, you may need it. So I felt so lousy anyway, I didn't know who to use it on, the Japanese. So anyway, they did, the Wisconsin National Guard, bless their hearts, stopped these Japs on the Boona Trail. And for some reason or other, they didn't push it. I don't know what happened, but the Japanese didn't push it, because I'm sure there were, I don't know how many there were soldiers, but there couldn't have been as many as there were Japs. So one night the guy came into the tent and said, hey Greg, your buddies came up from Townsville and they're going to take you back. So they loaded me into an ambulance or something and took me down to the airport, airfield, and there were guys I had known, and they said that, you know, I was laying in bed up there and was having it too good, so they were going to take me back to Townsville. That was welcome news. And at that time, the Japanese fleet had met the American fleet and around there, and they'd had a battle, and for some reason or other, as I read it later in books, the Japanese admiral had it made, but he turned tail and retreated. So, you know, the heat was off at Port Moresby, and what we did was we flew back to Townsville, where they had a whatever kind of hospital that was set up in a school. So they put me in that hospital, And on the way back, we ran into a lot of ships, and they started to fire at us. Happened to be the U.S. Navy, and we really didn't appreciate that. But when we got home, or back to the field in Townsville, they told us we had been in the Battle of the Coral Sea. And the only thing, the Navy had been in the Battle of the Coral Sea, and we had been fired on by our own Navy. I wish we had had some bombs, we would have let them go, but we didn't. And so from that point on, when I got back in the hospital, I had a couple good doctors there. One who told me, "Don't worry, you got tuberculosis, but we'll send you back to Denver, and they'll collapse your lung, and in a year or two you'll be perfectly okay." That was fine. So 2 days later, he comes in again. He says, "Well, we made a little mistake. You don't have tuberculosis. You got viral pneumonia or something, and we mistook it for tuberculosis." So that was good news. I said, "But you owe me." He was a good guy. He was from Hanover, Pennsylvania. Certain people you don't forget. And he said that, by this time, it was about, I can't tell you the date, but anyway, I told him he owed me because he scared me to death. He said, "Okay, I'll get you 10 days R&R down in Sydney." Well, that was good. And he said, "Now I want you to remember one thing. When you get down there, you've been pretty sick, so drink a lot of milkshakes. That's what you need. Milkshakes, and get out in the sun and lie down on the beach and get a little sun." Sun was easy to come by down there, and so were milkshakes. But when I got down to Sydney, I wasn't interested in milkshakes. In those days, before I became a teetotaler due to my stomach, not due to my mind, we didn't have many milkshakes, but we had some pretty good booze, and that really builds you up. You know what? We felt sorry down there. It was a terrible thing. All the men in Australia were at Tobruk. Remember Tobruk? And when they had a draft, they just took everybody, and there were no men in Australia. Really, there were no men, and they left all those pretty little girls there, and they were lonely. So we tried to help them out a little. Keep them company. We thought it was a good, Boy Scout stuff. We were just being nice. And that's what happened in Australia. And finally, we went back to Townsville and kept bombing up to Rabaul and all up those places. And when we'd go on a bombing mission, it was a long flight and a short mission because these Japs were pretty well
May I have your
entrenched.
attention, please? The library is closing in 30 minutes. The coffee machines will be
So,
turned off in 15
anyway, we
minutes. Please
went
take your
back
copies now.
and kept
Thank you.
bombing and so forth. Each mission would carry about 8 500-pound bombs or equivalent. And that bomb site wasn't quite as good as they told us it was, or else we weren't. I don't think we hit much. I'd sit there and watch, but we did hit some Japanese fighters. And they told us that Japanese Zeros could not get as high as we could. That was not true. Actually, they used to come at us from above, and we were at 18,000 feet. Usually we'd go down to about 15,000, which was more comfortable. We were on oxygen the whole time. Those oxygen masks, if you didn't shave every morning, boy, keeping those on for hours would really make your skin all rough, itchy. So anyway, the Japanese had Zero fighters, and they'd come and make passes at us, and they were fast and would fire at them with machine guns. Up in the nose, I had a machine gun, which this old timer had showed me how to use. I don't think they had a thing to worry about, the Japanese pilots. I don't think I hit any of them, but when they're coming at you nose first, and you see those little blinks, and their machine guns firing at you, you know every one is headed for you. And I was scared, believe me. Anybody that says they weren't scared was a liar. We were scared. But that airplane was a good airplane. You could fly it with engines out. You could fly that thing with 2 engines on one side out, if you knew what you were doing. And thank goodness we never had to do that. We used to have to shut down an engine because these engines were made not by Pratt & Whitney or Wright. They were made during the war, a lot of them made by Studebaker. And man, they were oil guzzlers. So in order not, they used to burn up oil by the gallon, literally. So when the oil pressure started to drop in an engine, we knew what it was that it burned up. So it shut down in one engine. And without the bomb load, which we had dropped, it flew perfectly well on 3 engines. Well, it was a little hairy in a crosswind, but it wasn't bad. And I'll tell you, I was really sold on Boeing after all that. And then it came time, they told us to go down from Townsville to Sydney again. And when we got to Sydney, they were sending us home. They said they were sending us home. What were they sending us home in? A war-weary B-24 that they had. So they put all of us on one of them. And there were, a bunch of 3 or 4 pilots and half a dozen navigators and all that. We were just dead weight. And we started to fly home across the Pacific to, they told us where to go. Where to go was Hawaii. You had to stop and gas up a couple times on the way. Man, that is a long way, and that's a big ocean. So we were supposed to stop at 2 places to gas up. One was, one island was...
Christmas? Is it Christmas Island?
Yeah, Christmas Island, never forget it. And Christmas Island and Canton Island. Now these are specks like this in the Pacific. They're little atolls, really. They're a little more than an atoll. They're coral. They're coral atolls. And they sit about this far above the water. And they're not very big. So we did it in the daylight. And why they decided daylight, I don't know. They really didn't ask me. So we went, boy, it was hours and hours of flying. And, flying is described as hours and hours of boredom, punctuated by seconds of terror. And that's about right.
Dana Minono, please come to the front desk.
Gotta watch your time. But anyway, these islands were a little tough to hit. Now, if you'll remember, the woman who got lost over there, Amelia Earhart, I'm sure that we were on the same route that she was. But there were no radio helps, no nothing. So we were in daylight, so we couldn't do it by stars. We had to do it by the sun. The sun only gives you one line of position, which you move up to the place where you're going and dead reckon from there in.
You got about 5 minutes.
Okay, so I'm just about finished. So that's what we did. We found these islands. Each one, the Pacific was clear as a bell. Not a star, not a cloud in the sky. But over each of these little islands everywhere, there was a big cumulus cloud, which threw a shadow down. And you didn't always, weren't sure it was an island. But we found these islands by doing something we were taught, by offsetting the one side. That way you knew you were to go north or south of the island. You weren't guessing that the island is down here. So if we offset our course to one side, we knew it would be on the right or left. And we found these two islands, got gas on them, gassed up, kept on going. Finally, we got to Hawaii. And boy, that was a welcome sight. And we landed at Hickam Field, which was still a shambles from the war days. And this was just about March of 1941. And we went to, we stayed on Hawaii 1 week. That was the most we stayed anywhere. And we stayed at Hickam Field. Needless to say, they had good food and a good place to sleep. And we left Hawaii. We were told that we were going to leave. You see, we didn't count missions. They didn't do it in those days. Well, when we were there in 1942, you just kept on flying until they told you to stop. And you'd bomb each day. So there wasn't a question of, well, I only got 5 missions to go, or whatever. It was when they told you to go home. That's what we did. And we got back to Hawaii. And then one night,
Dana Mignon, if you're in the library, please
got us
come
all
up to the
together
front desk. Dana Mignon,
in
please come up to the front
the
desk.
office and said, okay, tonight you're going home. Your next stop is California. So we had been, you know, a little bit ragged by that time. And somebody turned on a record player, and they played California, Here I Come. And we all sat down and cried like babies. I'm not ashamed of that at all. So we went the next day, next night, we started out for California and for San Francisco. I knew I couldn't miss that. You just keep flying, and sooner or later you're going to hit that. It was a 10-hour trip, and when we saw the bridge in California, in San Francisco, Golden Gate, nothing ever looked better. So after that, we became instructors because we had combat experience. Nobody else did. And the guys weren't coming back from Europe or anything then. And we were back, the first ones back, I think. And we had training programs. That is, we trained the other guys. And that's what we did. Finally, I got back to Philadelphia, and that cemented the trip around the world. It closed the gap around the world. At which point, the 23rd of
December.
The terrible thing to forget
42.
is I got married. So, and then I went on a tour of the United States via the 2nd Air Force, teaching navigation, all the other stuff that I had to teach. And very quickly, because I gotta let the president on.
It's 8:45.
Okay. It's very quickly. Went to places like Clovis, New Mexico, Alamogordo, New Mexico,
Louisiana.
somewhere in Louisiana. These are all garden spots too. But the fields at least were good, the food was good, and that's where we stayed. And finally I wound up at the country club of the Air Force, which was in
Orlando.
This is in Orlando, Florida. AFTAC, the Air Force Tactical Command, where all the foreign field grade officers were brought over from their cities, from their countries, and taught American tactics and things here. So it was pretty much of a garden spot. And I was there until I got out in 1945. And went home. And I was still rankled that they had sent me to navigation school. I just annoyed them. So I never forgave them for that. As soon as I got a few bucks together, I bought an airplane. And I went down to get a license. And I went out here to Wingsfield. There's a nice guy there. And I said, I want to learn on a tail dragger, because that's what we had in the Air Force. We had PT-17s, which were steermans, and they were tail draggers. And I figured that I was going to learn on the same one they said you can't learn on. So I did. I got my license, and I got my twin engine license, my multi-engine license,